It's the New World Wine Tour, shot entirely on location in the lovely Niagara Peninsula in southern Ontario. Sit back, relax, and learn everything you need to know about wines and how they're matched with foods. I'm your touring wine guide host, Jonathan Welsh. Birds are a constant problem in vineyards, and growers have tried just about everything to stop them from ravaging their grapes. The problem becomes more severe in the fall, when grapes are at their maximum sweetness. Although time-consuming and expensive, growers find it necessary to cover vineyards with netting. This becomes an effective deterrent, especially when protecting the late harvest and ice wine grapes.
What we're mainly interested in is the starlings and blackbirds, because they flock, and they'll flock in up to 500 or 1,000 birds at a time, and they'll swarm. Basically, they'll swarm into a vineyard. And when they land, they're there for 5 minutes. They just devour the grapes. They'll eat the whole bunch, everything. And then they take off, and then they'll swarm back down again. So last year, in a matter of about 4 hours, we lost about $3,000 worth of Chardonnay. So it meant I had never used bangers before that. I borrowed one, put it in, and from then on, we didn't have any problems.
In her own quest for excellence as a gold medal Olympian, Silken was a great dinner companion, joining me in my quest for excellent wine.
I think what's most important is that I still enjoy the process, and no goal would be enough on its own. The goal of winning Olympic gold medal, it's a great goal to have, but the daily process is really hard, and it means training all day, every day, in the cold and the rain, and the rotten weather sometimes, and unless you enjoy the process, and I love the process of going out and training. I love the feeling of being strong and fit, and I love competing.
Well, now, when you travel around the world, do you eat a lot? Do you drink a lot? Do you?
Yes. Well, we have to be a little careful about how much we drink because, of course, we're in training. So I enjoy most of my good wines in the fall when I'm not training as much.
Well,
we enjoy some great food.
Everyone thinks that winemaking is such a romantic profession, and it's all fun. It's wining and dining. You have guests in and so on. I don't know. Sometimes, yes, but most of the time you're there and you're wet and you're in there with your head in a vat of wine, checking, you have a hose, you know, and the grapes are coming in, you're raking the grapes off the bins into the crusher. It's a lot of back-breaking work. I mean, after, when it's all done, you can sit back and relax. And with lighter
Cape Spring winemaker Angelo Pavan selected a Riesling and a Cabernet Merlot for our appetizer.
This afternoon, I think Riesling perhaps I think the greatest white wine grape. There are those who are going to beg to differ and say Chardonnay. Chardonnay is sort of, you know, said it's the Gucci grape. It's very popular.
The Gucci grape?
The Gucci grape. Because,
Chardonnay, the Gucci grape. I'll remember that. That's a good one.
Pronounce Chardonnay. But with Riesling, we'll have it in the dry style that you're going to have this first course right through. We're going to have another off-dry style with the main dish, and then a dessert Riesling, which I think will be very special.
We distinguish what we call the nose of the wine is really two parts, bouquet and aroma. Aroma derives from the fruit. Bouquet derives from the vinification process.
Historically, I mean, in Europe where the great wines originate, they didn't have refrigeration back then, and they were stored in very cool cellars, and they were brought up. But room temperature was around 60 Fahrenheit, or what is that, 17, 18, 19 degrees Celsius. So even red wines, when they say serve them at room temperature, they shouldn't be too warm, especially in the summertime. Let them sit out. They get too warm and they go sort of flat. You just can't smell as much in the wine. So room temperature means cool, actually. It doesn't mean warm.
Temperature when you're serving wine is really based on the European idea of temperature, which was, predates central heating. And cellars used to be fairly cool. They would be around about 15 to 17 degrees Celsius. And then, of course, the eau chambre would be about 18 to 20. And those are actually the good temperatures to serve a red wine. White wine should be colder, but certainly not the refrigerator cold temperatures that we have here that we seem to favor in North America. And a good white wine should never really sit in an ice bucket. It's much better if it's served at a temperature of about 8 degrees or so Celsius, 8 to 10 for a Chardonnay, and around that for, a little bit cooler perhaps for a Riesling. But that's all part of the enjoyment of the wine. You'll find that, the various elements that are in the flavors, that are in the nose, Those are all accentuated at the proper temperature.
How do you know what wine goes with which food?
Oh, okay. I say wing it.
That's what we're doing.
So is this an educated
no.
wing?
Which wines go with which foods? We can generalize a bit, but I think after we generalize, it's up to the particular individual. I mean, we all have different tastes. We appreciate different flavors, so it's up to you to find what you like and go with that style of wine or that particular wine.
It takes a deal of husbandry to make it. I think a good winemaker is like a good chef. If you start with a good ingredient, you should wind up with a good product if you have a moderate level of skill. If you have a great level of skill, you can start with a good product and make something absolutely impeccable and ethereal and something that people will really like. And I think that's the winemaker's functions. It's not just a matter of keeping things clean and hygienic and making sure that things are done on time, but it's a feel for it. You have to know, like, they don't just take a sample of the wine, take it in the lab and say, okay, well, this has 6.7 grams of acid per liter. That's perfect. You know, the winemaker actually has to taste it.
Generally, the lighter the course, the lighter the food, the lighter the flavors, the lighter the wine, okay? Because wines and foods have to complement each other. As when you're cooking, you don't want to put heavy spices, heavy herbs on a lighter meat, say, for example, just overpower the natural flavors and the ingredients of that dish. So light wines with light foods, heavier wines with heavier foods. And you hear it said, white wine with fish, red wine with meat. I say humbug. It all depends. The key, I guess, in matching wines with food is forget about whether it's fish, fowl, or meat, or vegetable, and concentrate on the sauce and the particular flavors in the sauce, because whether they're spicier, sweeter, whatever, that will determine the overall flavor of the particular dish. And that's what I always do. When I'm asked to match wines with foods, I'll say, well, geez, I don't know. I can't really generalize that much. Bring the food over, and I'll stick my finger in there, excuse me. And once I taste the sauce, then I have some kind of idea.
We're starting off with a venison. The venison is locally done for me. It's smoked in St. Catharines, and it's a very nice sort of appetizer. It's light again.
Now, you're a vegetarian, or you don't eat?
Yes, I'm a vegetarian, so I eat fish, but I don't eat red meat or chicken. So I have a little bit different meal than you, but it looks delicious.
Now, I'm also doing a vegetarian appetizer, and all it is grilled vegetables, and I'm going to warm these up in the oven very quickly because they're already cooked. Could you put that in the oven? And what I have done with the grilled vegetables is made a very light 2% yogurt dressing to go with it. And what is in there is a little Dijon, a little mandarin juice, a garlic, and a little bit of vinegar to give it that tart taste.
Venison is a gamier meat. It's more of a full flavor meat, so it requires a somewhat heavier red. And I thought that the Cabernet Merlot would go well. It's a blend. Those grapes there are the great grapes, two of the great grapes of Bordeaux. Whereas if you buy a bottle of wine from Bordeaux, it doesn't say Cab Merlot or whatever. It's usually a blend of, you know, different varieties, and that's what I do with those varieties, because they tend to marry well, as, you know, putting different spices together, and you get a more pronounced effect.
Most of the successful Cabernet wines that are here in Ontario are pretty well always blends of Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and quite often Merlot as well.
Cabernet Franc has come on extremely strong as a varietal, being a little lighter in characteristic, and the Merlot also on its own a little softer and fruitier, and Cabernet Sauvignon as the sort of bigger one of the three. And if people are looking for a very, very dynamic, big, full-bodied red, the Cabernet Sauvignon would be their choice. But quite frankly, with people drinking more reds now, they don't always want a big red. They want something that's a little easier to sip.
It all depends where we're from in Bordeaux. It could be one grape, predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, or further north in Pomerol, it could be Merlot. But usually it's a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot. Though it won't say that on the label, because the French don't put the name of the grape on the label. Not usually, unless it's from Alsace. It's tough to figure out.
Ah, okay.
And just one other thing with the Cabernet Merlot. Usually, what you look for in a varietal character, I said Riesling is very fruity, floral, grapefruity. Cabernet and Merlot-based wines tend to be from the grape itself. They have a bit of green pepper, bell pepper, and there you hear that explained about Cab Sauvignon, or black currants, and I think that would go well with this. You have more of a blackberry, black currant bouquet and flavor to it.
One of the significant things in dealing with white grapes are the grapes are crushed and pressed immediately, and we extract the juice from the skins as soon as possible. The wines will undergo a very cool fermentation. When we add the yeast to the juice, the yeast is what's responsible for producing the wine. Yeast is a living organism that feeds on the sugar and produces alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. We want that fermentation to happen very coolly. This maintains the fresh fruity character of Rieslings and Chardonnays, and this is an attribute, something we want. With red wines, we crush the grapes and put the skins and the seeds and the juice in contact in a tank during fermentation. The enzymic reactions of the yeast during the fermentation release a lot of the color pigments and tannins out of the skins and the seeds. This is what gives red wine its color and its body. A lot of people think that vintage wines or great wines come from oak barrels, or they have to be aged in oak cask. And there's a lot of mystique around the use of oak barrels in cellars. I have a philosophy about using oak barrels much like a chef would use garlic in a kitchen. There's many foods that are enhanced by the use of garlic. We probably wouldn't put garlic on a fresh fruit salad.
It's fermented on the skins, stays in contact with the skins as it's undergoing this fermentation where the sugars are converted to alcohol. Then after that's done, what happens with the red grape varieties? They're pressed. Okay, in other words, remove what's called must or finished wine at that time from the skins. The skins are discarded, and you have a red liquid, which is a red wine. And then with the classic European varieties of red varieties, what we do is we put them in barrels. Okay, you hear about French oak barrels. I don't know if you've been through a winery, you see these, we call them barriques there.
Beautiful.
And the reason for that is, you know, they discovered historically, the Europeans have been making wine for centuries, that as the wine ages in barrels, it picks up a lot of complex flavors and aromas, especially, and even with some whites, with Chardonnays is aged, barrel aged, you get, when you pick it up and you get a bit in this one here, you smell a bit of cedar. I get a little bit of cedar in here, vanilla. Okay, just a hint. Yeah, and,
Yes.
you get that, and it just rounds out the wine a bit, but it's barrel aged.
Riesling is characteristically known as being very fresh, very crisp, almost citrusy overtones, like a fresh fruit salad. To introduce Riesling to an oak barrel and have it marry with the resins of an oak barrel is literally grounds for divorce immediately.
And there's a reason for that. Being an aromatic grape variety, you want to preserve those characteristics, that freshness, that fruitiness. So it's always kept in an inert container in stainless steel and never sees any barrel aging whatsoever. So that's why when you smell that, you can smell the grape itself. You're smelling Riesling. When we smell our Cabernet Merlot, you get the currant, the bell pepper, and so on. We get some other characters in there which are from the barrel. We do have a lot of tools at our disposal nowadays when it comes to making the wine. High-tech equipment that comes in from Europe and so on. We have crusher destemmers that take the berries from the stems, and we get nice fresh fruit into the press, and the press gives us nice fresh juice, so we have clean fermentations, nice stainless steel tanks, and so on. So we do have a lot of tools at our disposal, but it's not that it makes it any simpler than the old days. I think the ultimate tools are your nose and your palate.
Certainly, over the last decade, Canada has looked to the old world, I'm specifically talking about France and Germany specifically, to adopt the noble cultivars from those regions to introduce them here. I'm talking about grafting of the grape varieties onto specific rootstocks to be planted here in Canada. We've also looked to the old world for a lot of the winemaking techniques and traditions, of which we have refined upon now to the point of which we're seeing a lot of old world winemakers and wineries coming to Canada and North America to see the new world winemaking techniques. That's the point that it's evolved at.
Remember I was saying that with Riesling you can make it in so many styles. This one here has a little bit of sweetness in the wine, okay? And the way we've done that is we've, the sugars that are in there, there's a little bit of sugar left. There are natural sugars from the grapes. The way we make off-dry, we call it off-dry Riesling because it's not quite dry, but we don't call it medium dry because it's not really sweet either. It's sort of in between the dry that you had and something sweeter that we'll be having later, so we call it off-dry. And there's a little bit of sugar there. When the wine is fermenting, in other words, when those little microbes, those yeast are working away, I mean, you know, we all have to do our job and work. And they're fermenting the sugars. Before the wine ferments, as we say, ferment to dryness, okay, when there's no more sugar left, we stop the fermentation. We arrest the fermentation. The way we do that is basically we take that fermenting vat of wine and put it in deep freeze. And, you know, we chill it. We just put it in a refrigerated room and drop the temperature. The yeast die off, and we have a little bit of a sweetness left to it.
Why are you swirling that like that?
So I swirl water, too. Swirl everything.
The general rule of thumb is that a serious wine glass should have a bowl that's wider at the base than at the top, and should also allow, you know, some swirling and then a chance to develop, you know, the aromatics in the nose.
Now, the reason for that is when you're served wine, and you have to make sure it's okay, because once in a while, and you mentioned this, you get, when you hear about an off bottle or a bad bottle, that's not because of the wine, but because of the cork. Sometimes there's a little bit of corkiness there. If a wine smells musty or like a sort of damp basement or cellar smell, that's usually not the wine, it's the cork, some faulty cork, and just request another bottle.
So has air gotten in or something?
Well, it's not that. It's just the cork. The cork is a natural product, and what happens is, you know, there are little microbes in cork also, and if they're not all eliminated, they'll just keep working away, and then when the cork is put in the bottle, and just reacts with the wine.
I think there are a number of misconceptions about corks. One of them is that you can sniff the cork and get an idea of whether the wine is good or not. Unfortunately, corks usually smell like corks. And there's really not much that you can tell about the wine from that. But the cork does play an important role. It was actually the discovery of cork stoppers that allowed the idea of aging fine wines. And you know, that was discovered in the 17th century and then developed, of course, in the 19th century until the present day. But the corks actually don't have very much to do with aging wine. A lot of people think that corks, you know, that the air comes through corks. It doesn't. Cork is a very, very tight seal. What actually ages the wine is a little gap of air like that. Perhaps in the EEC they decreed that it has to be a maximum of 1/4 of an inch. And that little space is called ullage. And what it is just a tiny little bit of oxygen that's left in the bottle between the cork and the wine. And that little bit of oxygen is enough to allow for controlled oxidation or an aging of the wine.
Swirl around, get some air in there, give it a couple of quick sniffs, not too long. If you dwell on it too long, you won't smell anything. And there's probably a good biological reason for that, as when you're bicycling along the countryside and there's some, you know, strong aromas, you'll notice that after a while, you become desensitized, right? You don't smell them. Your brain just shuts down, or else it would be very uncomfortable, very unbearable for you. So it's the same when you're smelling anything. It just concentrate for a few seconds, and that's it. And then you go away and do something else.
But it's a preparatory exercise.
Yeah.
You know, you're preparing to ingest.
You're preparing for the that world of flavors that you're eagerly anticipating. So swirl it, smell it, and then when you go to taste the wine, you roughly do the same thing. It's called slurping it or gargling it. I know it doesn't sound all that.
Okay,
So try
slurping it. Okay.
Can I do it?
Sure, go ahead, do it.
I'll try not to.
Okay,
Here?
okay.
Okay. What you do, take a little bit in your mouth, bring your tongue out, and you sort of suck in air. Okay.
Try this.
Okay.
Why not? Why not?
Sure. Just take a wee bit. And the way you introduce air, you have to breathe in. Okay, so suck in some air there by just sticking your tongue out a bit. And the reason for that...
I'll try it first.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay.
Get your air.
I don't think I'm succeeding.
Well, you're going to have to practice a bit more.
I'll have to practice
His
that.
eyes are watering.
Well, my eyes are watering.
And then what we do, we've set the salmon up. The salmon has been sprayed with a little vegetable oil on the bottom so it doesn't stick. 3 slices of oranges. And then the salmon is about a 6-ounce portion on top of it. And here we go. We place this over the top. Then we bake it at 500 degrees for about 10 minutes. It sounds like it's really high, but it's the only way to do it so it's nice and tender and comes out perfectly for us.
Well, they do say that that wine is good for you, and I would think in moderation, wine is an excellent beverage to have with a meal. For me personally, just the effect of the alcohol, I have a low tolerance for alcohol, and it just makes me feel a bit sluggish the next morning. But I do drink in moderation, and I do drink wine with dinner.
Now, most athletes, then, do they keep an eye on what?
They keep an eye. You know, they wouldn't go and you know, drink excessively on a regular basis. But I don't think that's most likely not healthy for anybody.
No.
What we have in Canada is we have Canadian vineyards, Canadian grapes, and we have winemakers trained all over the world, and we have simply a mecca of different cultures and talents being influenced in the wines. That's why it's so exciting. If you go to the different wineries in Ontario, you will get French-style wines, German-style wines, Italian-style wines, because that's the influence of the winemaker. And that's what's very exciting for the consumer, because no other appellation in the world do they have that ability or flexibility to try different style wines from one region.
What we're looking for is a weightiness to the wine that will match the weightiness of the sauce. We want to try to match them sweetness-wise, weight-wise, and so on. And I see chefs doing it. We can use a spoon, or what they do is you just stick your finger in there like this.
All right, we're all going to do it.
We're pretending we've just created these dishes ourselves, right? We've done the cooking.
Oh, wow.
And taste the sweetness, right?
Yeah, taste the sweetness.
Oh, and the other thing.
Very defined.
The citrus flavors.
Yes.
Let me see. There's, yes, we have oranges. So you
Orange,
can
I can taste that.
Yeah, I can
sweet
taste
and
that.
is citrusy. Now, wine, especially white wine, has citrus flavor to it. Let's try the wine and see if it works.
On top of that.
You're getting good at that, Jonathan.
Yeah, you heard that. No, you have to at the end of it. No, you will.
Thinks you got white.
No, I see. Okay, I taste that.
It's good together, really good together.
I do. It's as if that wine was just another element of the sauce, I think, on the salmon. Now, if that were something else, a full-bodied Cab Merlot, I don't think it would work as well, because first of all, it would be dry, it would be tannic, that furriness that I spoke of.
Well, that's another edition of the New World Wine Tour. I'd like to thank everyone who helped with the show. And remember, wine does contain alcohol, so please, you can enjoy exploring it, but always exercise moderation. Until next time, this is Jonathan Welsh, wishing you bon appetit and cheers.